Ukraine's use of drones is quite different to Russia's, uses quite a lot of drones in quantity, right? Expecting a lot of them to maybe be hit or taken out. Is that the case? What's the difference between the two countries' approach to the use of them? Does that dictate how they manage and operate drones in the field?
My opinion about this is that Ukrainians are a bit faster and more creative, but in general, I think the situation doesn't look that good for Ukrainians because Russia learns lessons, and whenever they learn a lesson, they are able to put it in a systematic way and integrate it into their military. So once they realize that FPV drones work and other types of drones, they scale up production, they integrate it into the military operations.
Well, I tend to agree. Russia definitely wants to use mass and the capacity that mass delivers, but Ukraine has gotten really well at interdicting the majority of the drones that Russia launches.
This is the Global Gambit.
In the past couple of days, we've had over 479 exact drones hitting Ukraine from Moscow. That is the single largest attack of this style since the war began and arguably in history. Drones seem to be everywhere at this point, in the news, in the fields, in the air, and are rapidly changing, evolving the military world as we know it. And obviously that was, I think, no more better illustrated than in Operation Spiderweb, which at this point we have covered extensively on the channel and in the show. But I wanted a bit more of a technical, a little bit more of a targeted cover of this, and I couldn't think of two better people to cover this who come from Washington, the sphere of political, what they call the swamp. Samuel Bendett, who we've had on the show before, who covers military robotics, drones, UAVs, Russian military weapons, and has been part of CNAS and CSIS, or Center for Strategic and International Studies. Joining him is Kateryna Bondar, who is the fellow within the award-winning AI Center at CSIS as well, and whose article, when I first started trying to understand operations by the way, inspired me to reach out, and here we are now with two, I think, of the foremost voices on this area of war and military affairs. So thank you both for joining. Maybe, Sam, if we go to you first, for old time's sake, what is your general sort of takeaways from the past couple of weeks, Ukraine's actions and successes, if you like, and then Kate will turn to you.
With everything that's been written and said about this operation already, I think I want to highlight the following. It's not just about the technology in this case. In this case, it was Ukraine's long-term planning and intelligence operations, their patience in scouting out the targets, their patience in operating right under the Russian FSB's nose, their long-term outlook at how this operation would unfold. So this took quite a long time, and I think this is quite commendable. A lot of operations we're witnessing right now on both sides. We don't really know what goes on when it comes to planning for those strikes, how long the information was analyzed, how long the targets were selected, and so on and so forth. In this case, however, we got to view how Ukraine has planned this. And again, this is definitely more about planning. This is more about intelligence than just the technologies, because as we will learn in this conversation, as we have learned from previous analyses already, the technology is quite widely available already, and Ukrainians simply matched their desires to available technological capabilities with a twist. And the twist, of course, was that intelligence and long-term planning.
And Kay, you wrote, as I mentioned just now, just over a week ago, the sort of way the Operation Spiderweb is redefining asymmetric warfare. So if you wanted to add any comments to what Sam just said, but I am very curious for you what you meant in that article. It will be linked in the description for people interested. And sort of the bigger meaning behind what Ukraine's sort of achievements mean for warfare.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Pyotr. Thank you for having me here. And I will just probably start with what Sam has mentioned and follow up on that. So Sam said that it's more about strategy and planning rather than technology, and I completely agree. But just to follow up on the technology part, in this operation, we witnessed that Ukrainians use basically just usual FPV drones, and they used usual mobile networks to operate those drones, which in fact shows that readily available off-the-shelf technology which is available across the world in any online store to any hobbyist, can be weaponized, can be militarized, and can actually become a weapon. And I think it sends a really strong signal for militaries across the world that their military strategic objects has to be way better protected against this kind of threats. In addition to that, these drones were equipped with very basic open source software, which helped Ukrainian operators to operate these drones in such huge distances. So these are solutions like Ardopilot, for example, which helps to stabilize the drone, which helps to actually keep the drone in a flight mode if the signal is interrupted. Because to operate an FPV drone, you actually do it manually, like all the angles and all the directions of the drone flight, you do it manually. So without this open source available cheap technology, that might be probably wouldn't be possible. So again, it shows the access that this technology is accessible to basically anyone in the world. And again, it's an emphasis on the need to protect military objects, civilian infrastructure from this kind of threats. On a broader scale, of course, I agree that it's a genius planning and it requires a lot of time and patience. And this is what we can be like just impressed with. And I'm sure this operation will become a part of history and intelligence and military books for centuries, probably. But again, on a broader scale, I don't really think that it changes the balance of power in this war, because yes, Ukrainians claim that they have destroyed 1/3 of Russian heavy bombers and long-range strike fleet. But again, we saw the response, and we saw that actually it didn't change the balance in current war, and Ukrainians are still undergoing very heavy bombing and strikes on their territory with Shaheds, with another type of systems. So unfortunately, I would treat this operation as let's say, a spark, rather than a huge pivot and change, a long-term change in this war.
But to be devil's advocate on that point, Kate, one of the things that we had covered when we had General Ben Hodges on the show just recently was sort of that, yes, this is a singular operation which will not ultimately completely change the strategic direction that the war is going in at the moment, but does it not, to you, illustrate quite a significant shift in how countries, militaries should, even non-state actors should prioritize where they put their military focus, right? Because Moscow lost a significant proportion of military assets which are just not replaceable. The parts are no longer manufactured, etc. And so countries that are not in the war but are obviously aware of, I don't know, border tensions with other neighbours or something, they want to invest in assets that are cheaper, right? They don't have to spend millions, billions on bombers and big scale assets. They can just focus on these, I think you even wrote it in your article, right? You know, sort of drones made out of bits picked off the shelf. So do you not think that there's a little bit more of a strategic implication there?
Yeah. I don't deny the strategic implication at all, but I'm just saying that it hasn't changed the course of this current war like dramatically. Correct. So the lessons that we can learn from this operation is that no matter where the strategic object is located, it's not safe, it's not protected. Russia was trying to hide and remove its heavy bombers further from Ukrainian territory, trying to save it from Ukrainian long-range drones, which can fly up to like 1,500 or 2,000 kilometers. Which Ukrainians show that even bases located 4,000 kilometers from Ukrainian border, and actually there was another attempt in Amur region which wasn't successful, but it's even further. So it's on the other side of Russia, basically. So it just proves the fact that geography and physical reach of any weapon system directly is not a limitation anymore, and is not a constraint anymore because of this availability of this off-the-shelf products. And it's just a matter of like, the question is how you use these systems, how you deploy them. That's the main question. And it's not the first time Ukrainians use platforms to deliver cheap treatable systems to the target. If you look into their operations in the Black Sea, they use their sea drones like Magura, for example, to deliver 4 FPV drones closer to the target. And just recently we saw the reports that Ukrainian sea drones delivered FPV drones to drilling stations, gas stations in the Black Sea, and they were bombing with FPV drones, basically those drilling platforms, gas platforms. So it's actually not the first time, and I would just consider it as a lesson learned and as a new strategy and tactics of using these off-the-shelf products. I'll probably give it over to Sam to add on this.
I agree with Kate. I think Ukraine definitely sets the tone and has already delivered systems that carried other FPV drones and other UAS to target. I think once again it's an incredible operation, and I think it kind of woke a lot of forces around the world, a lot of militaries around the world, to the actual possibility that this can happen in exactly the same way as it unfolded in Ukraine. So there's a lot of discussion right now, held at different levels in the United States, in the West, and NATO countries, whether or not something like this can actually be a threat to American bases, to NATO bases, to American and Western assets like strategic bombers and other important items. And so this conversation, once again, is held at different levels. There's a lot of different opinions about this, lots of opinions that this can, in fact, or rather, this is something that should be considered seriously. Other opinion basically says that this should be viewed cautiously. And once again, as Kate said, it's a spark and not necessarily an evolution. But the way this was planned, the way this was executed, and obviously Ukraine also took, I think, advantage of the fact that Russians were actually filming this attack as it unfolded, inadvertently maximizing the effect, whether the attack was successful or even if it wasn't. We know now that some of the containers actually did not work and function as intended. And so it's the combined effect. It's the technology, as Kate said. It's the planning. It's the intelligence. It's the after effects, which are still reverberating. The videos of that attack are still playing out on social media, and anybody with access to the internet can actually get access to them and just view them again and again and again. And obviously, we don't know what kind of conversations are now had internally within the Russian military, within the Russia's strategic forces, and exactly what kind of conclusions they're going to draw and what they will do next.
Yeah, I think one of the main takeaways I've had is that the global south, if you like, I think will be taking a lot of notes. I worked a lot in East Africa, and as soon as you got drones coming into the Ethiopian theatre, for example, like the federal government versus the GPLF or the sort of rebel forces, it was a complete game changer. And I think that's where I'm quite curious to see how the role of drones and the remarkable impact they can have in tiding the turn of specific exchanges. But I think we all agree that this is an incredible operation, but it's different from the broader strategic direction. But how that plays out in other countries which don't have the budget to afford big military assets, but drones are very versatile and useful. I think that's, we've seen that with Turkey and its drones being hugely in demand. But Sam, one element that I'm quite interested in your view on is the robotics front, because you obviously touch upon that quite a lot as a subsection, if you like, of drones more broadly. How much could you take us through who aren't following this on a day-to-day basis, the role of the robotics in this, and more broadly how they've been leveraged in sort of, I don't know, how well Ukraine has been able to produce or reach into further deep into Russia? Like, what role is the robotics angle there?
So we know for a fact that this attack had a combination of pilot operated and semi-autonomous systems. We know some of the systems actually flew to targets on a predetermined path. And then in some cases, the pilots actually took over. So I think this mix, this combination is what is actually defining the war in Ukraine right now. There are a lot of experiments and trials with greater and greater autonomy in this conflict on both sides. However, pilot-operated systems are still very much a dominant element right now on both sides of the equation. And so in this specific attack, we will probably argue over the definition of autonomy in this specific strike, of what it actually meant for the Ukrainians and Russians. But again, the technology on which this was based is readily available. It is open source. There really were no surprises per se once the attack unfolded as far as what kind of technologies were used and how the operation was executed. And this is where Ukrainians are probably best in utilizing open source tech to really kind of take these technological leaps. Oftentimes, Russian commentary about the war, and certainly about this particular operation, really boils down to the fact that Ukrainians are better organized when it comes to technology development, technology utilization, cooperation between units and forces that ultimately execute operations at the front. And so the spiderweb operation, again, is also a result of these multiple avenues, sort of these multiple efforts coming together, and in something that has been planned for quite a while. I mean, for me as an analyst, it was surprising to hear that this operation took almost 18 months to plan and execute. So this shows long-term outlook and a lot of efforts that went into identifying where and how this would unfold. We don't know if similar or copycat operations around the world are going to be executed as meticulously, and whether or not other actors trying to copy Ukrainian success will follow the same path. But I think Ukraine laid out the blueprint for how this would actually happen and how this would happen. And again, when it comes to the actual technology, we now know that some of it was actually assembled over the long period of time in southern Russia. The containers were also assembled over a long time in Russia. This long-term outlook is what actually defines this. And I think those who are paying very close attention and discussing the effects of this operation on Western and NATO assets are probably going to also assume that some of the actors that will try to execute something similar will likely take a long time to plan and execute something like that.
Yeah, we've got the NATO summit coming up in a couple of weeks, haven't we? So we'll be covering takeaways from that on the channel as well, so people can look out for that if they want to subscribe. But Kate, sort of building on what Sam said, you wrote in your article, you had a really interesting aspect about the role AI played. And sort of I wanted to bring in a little bit of that because I thought it was really interesting how you point out that they were able to help with precise strikes on specific vulnerable components of these high-value aircraft. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, but also anything else that you wanted to comment that Sam mentioned.
Yeah, Pyotr, when I was talking with the Ukrainian military about this operation and this specific aspect, they told me, poverty is a mother of innovation, which means Ukrainian doesn't have resources to develop expensive systems, big platforms, and that's why Ukrainians are so good, as Sam said, in utilizing open source technology, which is free or very cheap and readily available. Ukrainians cannot develop their own deep tech AI capabilities, and that's why they're just customizing and tailoring what they can get for free to achieve their goals. And in this specific case, yes, computer vision models were used for training. Actually, were used for more precise targeting, and as they claim, they used existing museum planes, which are based in Poltava, which I also saw. There's real bombers, Soviet bombers, and they're still available in museum. So they use those airplanes to basically train AI models to recognize the spots and the weakest places on the plane where the drones should hit the target. And these are mostly fuel tanks, because the explosive device which is attached to an FPV drone is pretty small, so you have to strike into the spot which would actually help to destroy the whole plane. So they use those models to train, airplane models, to train AI to identify those spots. And most probably this software was integrated into those drones just like a supportive function, let's say, just in case if the signal is interrupted. So there is a chance that this software might work and actually help the drone to reach the target. But it wasn't fully autonomous mission, and it wasn't AI war as sometimes I read in the news. Yes, this technology was used, but as a supplementary function to manually operated FPV drone. So, and again, this is like an example and demonstration on where the autonomy is going, like where are we, the direction of this technology development. And I think in future, when this technology becomes more reliable and trusted, because in the battlefield, and especially in this kind of operations, which require a lot of time and resources to plan, the stakes are very high. So if you're not 100% sure that technology will work, of course, you don't rely fully on that. So, but I think in a very near future, we'll see more and more sophisticated technology and AI, which is able to conduct very precise strikes. And we'll see more integration of autonomous flight, autonomous navigation with automatic target recognition, but basically this is AI-enabled target recognition and locking on the target and actually striking the target, engaging the target. So if you put all these functions together and you let the system execute them, what you have is full autonomy. So I think we'll get there pretty soon, but definitely not this year, maybe in a couple of years. But it's just my assumption. Don't quote me on that.
No, it's all right. There's a fair amount of speculation that comes with these podcasts, isn't there? One of the questions I was quite simply interested in was comparatively, like Ukraine's use of drones is quite different to Russia's. Moscow uses quite a lot of drones in quantity, right? Expecting a lot of them to maybe be hit or taken out. Is that the case? Like, Kate, can you outline to us what's the difference between the two countries' approach to the use of them? And generally, is that something we're beginning to see, that different countries, depending upon their interests in a conflict or their size of their military or competency, does that dictate how they manage and operate drones in the field?
Well, my opinion about this is that Ukrainians are a bit faster and more creative about innovating and about changing, adapting technology and experimenting with different solutions, and probably deploying solutions which are working in experimentation, just because the size of the military, just because the closeness of civilian sector and the military. Russia is just much bigger scale, and it's harder to be that flexible and be that fast. But in general, I think the situation doesn't look that good for Ukrainians, because Russia learns lessons, and whenever they learn a lesson, they are able to put it in a systematic way and integrated into their military. So once they realize that FPV drones work, and other types of drones, they scale up production, they integrate it into the military operations, and their amount of resources is incomparably bigger than Ukrainian. So Ukrainians are more flexible, agile, and fast, but Russia has way more resources, and Russia is still more powerful, if I may say so, in longer term. So I don't know, Ukrainians probably need to figure it out how to counter their scale and mass production. That's probably the biggest threat from what I see.
All right, Sam, what do you think about this? What differences do we see between the Russians and the Ukrainians' approach?
Well, I tend to agree. Russia definitely wants to use mass and the capacity that mass delivers, but Ukraine has gotten really well at interdicting the majority of the drones that Russia launches. Yes, I agree with Kate that Russia has greater defense capabilities, and also that Russia is learning. Russia has been encouraged by all kinds of military experts and lots of other specialists who are supporting their fight against Ukraine in trying to take technological leaps to achieve a technological breakthrough, not just to catch up to Ukraine and copy what Ukraine has done, but do something that will take Ukraine off guard. And we've witnessed how that's actually possible last August when Russians started fielding fiber optic controlled UAVs in the Kursk region. In the long term, these drones were very devastating and very effective in ultimately helping to push Ukrainians out of the Kursk region. So Russians were actually the first movers when it came to fiber optic UAVs. And now they're scaling up this technology to quite significant levels, including launching production facilities all across Russia. And so Ukraine is obviously capable of delivering similar technologies, of catching up to the Russians, but it is essential to recognize that there are certain capabilities where Russians will have an advantage. Russian ISR UAVs, their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance UAVs, are roaming the Ukrainian skies in much greater numbers than Ukrainian ISR assets. And so this prompted Ukraine to come up with FPV interceptors to go after these Russian drones. And Russians are continuing to release more and more of these ISR UAVs into the Ukrainian skies. So there are certain capabilities where Russians will have an advantage because they are a bigger military, because they have a bigger military industrial complex, because they have established ways and avenues to bypass the sanctions and survive the sanctions, and because they too are learning how to better integrate their military-grade technologies with some of the commercial technologies and some of the volunteer and startup efforts, which are still defining how a lot of tactical level technologies are developed and fielded in this conflict.
So it sounds to me, Sam, then that these two are really sort of advancing each other's respective capabilities, right? Seems to be that this always happens in wartime. Technology rapidly accelerates in ways that we wouldn't have done if there wasn't that sense of necessity. But so sort of as we maybe look ahead, I would ask a two-pronged question to you and the same to you, Kate, which is largely, what could you expect to come in the next few months, short, medium term, not just in the context of Ukraine, but more broadly? But second, what would you recommend, I don't know, people who have roles to play in this, policymakers, whoever it may be? So sort of what would you expect to happen versus what you'd recommend should happen, if that makes sense, Sam?
Yeah, so what I expect is Russia fielding more and more different types of UAVs, a combination of radio-controlled, fiber optic-controlled, as well as limited AI-controlled drones, especially to tactical levels, greater numbers of ISR UAVs, and greater numbers of long-range Geteryna and similar types of drones, which Russia is manufacturing in much greater numbers. Russians are aiming to take control of the air littorals, the airspace where most of the tactical UAVs operate, and they aim to do so with a combination of their military capabilities, industrial capabilities, and a combination of cooperation with the civilian sector. For those who are watching this conflict, it is important to recognize that Ukraine has very unique characteristics as a conflict, but echoes of Ukrainian conflict are already reverberating around the world, as in different types of conflicts in Latin America, Africa, Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia. Tactical UAVs like the ones used in Ukraine are already utilized. And so in future wars, it is possible to encounter some of the tactics, concepts, and technologies we are witnessing in Ukraine. So it is important to take the lessons from Ukraine and when looking forward by considering what kind of tech would be applicable to a specific region, what kind of tactics are going to be utilized by militaries, by non-state actors, by empowered individuals when trying to combat each other or other forces.
Very good. Kate, what do you think?
I'll just add to that I would see more autonomy coming and AI-enabled autonomy. These autonomous systems will be integrated with all sorts of command and control systems, situational awareness systems, and it will bring the decision making close to real time. So this time lag will just shorten between the analysis of RSR and intelligence information and translating this into actionable information for decision making. So I would see more autonomy on the battlefield, more integration with situational awareness, and more AI-enabled decision making.
So not quite killer robots
as well.
then.
The big signal that this specific operation and this conflict sends to the militaries and governments across the world is that threats are becoming more and more asymmetric, I would say, becoming more and more, how would I put this, using the off-the-shelf products and readily available products. And the answers to these threats has to be asymmetric. So those drones which attacked Russian bases were flying 100 kilometers per hour. And they are so small and fast that usual air defense systems are just not able to intercept them. And if you compare the price of this weapon system with the air defense system, it's just incomparable. So I think that it sends the signal across the world that countermeasures should be developed and they should actually be integrated into a broader regulation, military doctrines, how to counter these kind of threats. So these are like two major trends that I see coming in the near future.
That's quite a note, a point on which to end on. Sort of war is becoming more accessible for all, by the sounds of it. No, that's not your choice of words. Okay, but it seems to me we can get pieces of tech and junk off the shelf and make a drone and suddenly. No, if leveraged correctly, I think they can be an incredible asset as illustrated. But thank you both very much. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you. Kate Bondar of CSIS and Sam Bendett of CNAS. And if you enjoy the conversation, then do subscribe and do check out the description for these guys. Fantastic work. But we'll see you all next time.